Yes. So now we're recording. So today it's a privilege to have Dr. Márton Vér from the Georg-August-Universität Göttingen present his research on old Uyghur documents from the Mongol period. And Dr. Vér has studied Altaic studies at the University of Szeged in Hungary, graduating in 2016. So he's an early career scholar. He's been a postdoc researcher at the Turfan Studies Research Group in Berlin. And now he is at the University of Göttingen. And his work is related, or his research is focusing on old Uyghur manuscripts, mostly from the Mongol period. So please welcome Dr. Vér.
Thank you very much. So I share my screen. Yes, and yes, and I have to put it somewhere here. Okay, so dear ladies and gentlemen, when Imre kindly invited me to talk here, he did not insist on any specific topic, besides that the talk should be connected to the Silk Roads. I could accept this stipulation, since basically all the scholarly work I have done so far is somehow connected to the Silk Roads. However, as you may know, it can be quite challenging to define a suitable topic when you have complete freedom to choose. This morning occurred to me a personal story that I would like to share. That in my case is that thing that basically all of my scholarly work is connected to the Mongols and the Silk Road. It has to be understood quite exactly, because in my first semester at the University of Szeged, I had a seminar. It was Silk Road in Antiquity, and I was quite late to attend. So the lecturer, Szabolcs Felföldi, who is here with us today, he told me that he gave out all the topics from, I don't know, Alexander the Great to Huansang. So he said to me that, okay, it's later, but write something about the Mongols and the Silk Road. So that was my first essay at the university. And basically since then, I'm rewriting this essay in different forms. And this talk will be one of these rewritten forms as well. So finally, I decided to divide my paper into two major parts with two subchapters each, moving from the more general topics to more specific topics. The first part will introduce the primary source material I work with, that is the old Uyghur documents, and provide a survey of the state of art, concentrating on the latest developments in cataloging and text editions. The second part will give an insight to the research concerning the postal system of the Mongol Empire and its social context based on the old Uyghur sources. First, giving an overview of the results of the last 10 years, philological research, showing how this material can help us to reconstruct the local and regional landscape of the Mongol Empire. The last section will focus on the scrutiny of a recently published register from the Berlin Turfan collection, trying to show how the operation of the empire's vast postal relay system and its socio-economic context through the philological analysis and historical interpretation of this document can be investigated. But before going into detail, I would like to give a very brief overview of the historical background to the source material. So significant groups of the Turkic-speaking Uyghurs left their former homeland in present-day Mongolia after the fall of their steppe empire, the Uyghur Khaganate, in the 840s. Most of the Uyghurs settled in two areas. the Gansu Corridor and the Turfan region along the northern route of the Silk Road. The Uyghurs gradually abandoned their nomadic lifestyle and settled in the oasis towns of the region. They merged with the mostly Indo-Iranian-speaking indigenous population and the Chinese population that had moved in earlier, achieving a unique cultural development that was accompanied by extraordinary economic progress. Those Uyghurs who migrated to the Turfan region established their own state there, the so-called Western Uyghur Kingdom or Uyghur Kingdom of Kocho. Besides Manichaeism and Buddhism, Christian communities belonging to the Church of the East were also present in Uyghur society. However, by the mid-11th century, Manichaeism has declined and Buddhism became the most influential religion in the West Uyghur Kingdom. From the middle of the 12th century, the Uyghurs became loosely dependent on the Karakitai state, and in 1209, the Uyghur ruler Barçuk Art Tegin Idukut voluntarily submitted to Genghis Khan, thus allowing his people to preserve a certain autonomy until the second half of the 13th century, when, due to the intra-Mongol civil wars, they completely lost their sovereignty. The Uyghurs were one of the first sedentary peoples with a high level of cultural and administrative development to join the empire voluntarily. Moreover, they had a nomadic past before their settlement. These circumstances made them perfect agents for the transmission of the necessary know-how through sedentary subjects, vital for the Mongols in the formative period of the empire. The most notable example of the Uyghur cultural influence on the Mongols, as scholarly literature usually emphasizes, is the Mongol borrowing of the Uyghur script. And this leads us to our actual topic, that is the Old Uyghur documents. First, I should define what I mean by Old Uyghur documents or civil documents. In the present paper, the designation Uyghur documents refers to a group of those documentary sources which derive from the Turfan region, the Gansu Corridor, and from the vicinity of Dunhuang. These documents were written in a semi-cursive and cursive style of the Uyghur script in the Old Uyghur, that is a Turkic language, between the 9th and 14th centuries. These sources can be alternatively called as civil documents or profane text also. Both designations show that these, contrary to the most of the Old Uyghur sources, are not religious texts, but official or private documents. As you can see on this slide, according to the general classification of the Old Uyghur documents, they are divided into two major groups: official and private documents. Within these two main groups, several further subgroups can be distinguished. As we will see later, these subgroups can be divided into further categories if special parts are edited, like the documents concerning the postal system. The most important collections of Old Uyghur sources are preserved today in Berlin, St. Petersburg, London, Paris, and in diverse collections in China and Japan. The first material fully catalogued was the Berlin Tulfan collection. In this case, we can talk about approximately 8,000 Old Uyghur fragments in total. 90% of these are religious texts, and the distribution as follows. About 800 are Manichaean, about 50 are Christian, and the rest are Buddhist texts. The remaining 10%, that is around 780, are the civil or profane documents. According to the brand new catalogue of the Old Uyghur manuscripts of the Serindia collection from St. Petersburg, out of the 586 so far published Old Uyghur texts, 141 have been categorized as secular or civil documents. That is about 24% of the whole published material from St. Petersburg. It must be stressed here that at this scale, the Old Uyghur civil documents compose one of the biggest corpora of local sources from Central Asia and the Eastern Silk Roads between the 9th and 14th centuries. Nevertheless, looking at the recent monographs on the history of the Silk Roads, the old Uyghur material is still barely used. There are multiple reasons for this omission. First, the fragmentary state of preservation and the lack of context. Second, the lack of old Uyghur narrative sources that could have the interpretation of our fragments. And third, and probably most importantly, until recently, a lack of cataloging and of standard editions with English translations. And now we reach the second topic of the presentation. So the first step towards text edition is cataloging the collections. This work is not yet finished in every collection mentioned above, but thanks to the cataloging work in two of the most important centers, Berlin and St. Petersburg, considerable progress can be reported here. The old Uyghur documents of the Berlin Turfan collection were edited by Simona Christiane Raschmann in her 2-volume catalog. The catalog entries provide physical descriptions, the character of the document, and the transcriptions of the first and last lines, along with earlier publications, facsimile publications, and citations of the document. Raschmann's recent collaboration with Osman Serkaya saw to publish a catalog of old Uyghur texts preserved in the Arat estate, containing many previously unpublished old Uyghur civil documents that were preserved only as photographs in the collection of the late Rashid Rahmeti Arat. With these 3 volumes, the documents of the Berlin Turfan collection are now catalogued. The most recent event to be reported from the field of cataloging is the publication of the catalog of the old Uyghur manuscripts from St. Petersburg. This volume provides the description of the so far published old Uyghur material of the Serindia collection. These 4 volumes are indispensable tools for research on old Uyghur civil documents. There are also some online resources to mention. I sent a PDF to the chat earlier. You can download it and you will see, or you will have all the links with a small description. But before turning to recent publications of the documents, I would like to mention another crucial development in the field of old Uyghur philology that is connected to the Göttingen Academy of Sciences and Humanities, more precisely to the Dictionary of Old Uyghur project that runs between 2017 and 2041. The most recent result of this project is the concise dictionary of Old Uyghur by Jens Wilkens in this year. The dictionary is also downloadable in PDF format from the homepage of the publisher for free. The figure of more than 5,000 downloads in the last 1 month clearly shows the significance of this indispensable handbook. The dictionary gives the German and modern Turkish translations of the old Uyghur words. The above mentioned lack of English translations does not mean that there have been no text editions of old Uyghur material, In fact, since 1928, the publication of the Uyghur Sprachdenkmäler, the first and for a long time the most important edition of old Uyghur documents, several important editions offered translations of these sources, but into German, French, Turkish, Russian, Japanese, or Chinese languages. Without going into detail, here I would like to mention probably the most influential recent work from 1993, the so-called Sammlung Uigurischer Kontrakte. The second volume of this 3-volume edition provides transcription and translations for 121 documents in Japanese and German. And the third volume published high-quality images of the documents. A remarkable source publication, the SUK, remains extremely valuable even today, despite some of the readings of some fragments having changed since its completion. To sum up, individual texts have been translated into English in articles, but no comprehensive English volumes of the texts were published until recently. Turning our attention to the most recent events in the publication of old Uyghur documents, 3 volumes of the Berliner Turfan Texte series must be mentioned. The first of these is Takao Moriyasu's edition of the letters that was published in 2019. This volume contains the transcription and English translation of 216 Old Uyghur letters with rich commentary. The author classified the material into 5 major groups according to their opening formulae and the relationship between addressees and senders. The second volume to be mentioned here is forthcoming this year. It will be an edition of Old Uyghur Administrative Orders by Professor Dai Matsui. Based on the earlier publications of the author, the volume will contain the edition and translation of approximately 100 documents. The last book I have to show you will lead us to our narrower topic, that is the postal system of the Mongol Empire. In 2019, I published the edition of 63 Old Uyghur documents concerning the famous postal system called Yam in Old Uyghur and Jam in Mongolian. This volume contains official and private documents alike. Due to the specific nature of the material, special subcategories were introduced, such as provision orders, granting food, beverages, and horses to clients of the postal system. Another such group is the Kezig orders related to cases in which the so-called Kezig tax was compensated with labor work in kind or by provision of relay animals. To sum up, significant parts of the Old Uyghur material are already published. And with the 3 volumes of the Berlin Turfantexte series mentioned above, roughly 1/3 of the corpora is and will be soon available in English translation with detailed commentary. The great importance of these primary sources arises from 2 facts. First, they report on territories that compared to imperial centers are less attested in the historical sources in the 9th to 14th centuries. For example, the Chagatai Ulus, incorporating the Turfan region, still counts as the least studied realm of the Mongol Empire due to the limited number of relevant sources. Second, most of the modern histories of these territories are based primarily on limited external narrative sources such as Chinese annals or Persian chronicles, Latin travelogues, and the like. In contrast to these, the Old Uyghur sources give us unique insights into the daily life, economy, legal traditions, and operation of government or administration in this region. In the following section, I will give an overview of recent results from the study of the Old Uyghur documents to illustrate their importance. Since a comprehensive account of all possible aspects would go beyond the limits of this talk, I will concentrate on the Mongol period and on one imperial institution that interlinked most segments of state and society, the postal system. So, the postal relay system of the Mongol Empire is usually handled as a uniform and permanent institution throughout the Mongol period with insufficient stress on its temporal and spatial dimensions. In contrast to this attitude, one upshot of the philological analysis of the Uyghur documents concerning the Yam system is that it allows us to see this complex and sophisticated communication system as an institution ever changing both in time and space. Furthermore, as stated above, the Old Uyghur documents give us unique insights to the practices of daily life. Accordingly, the following discussion is divided into 3 parts: temporal aspects, spatial aspects, and operation of the postal system. Here I would like to remark that although the Old Uyghur documents will remain the focus of this discussion, the contemporary Middle Mongolian documents, primarily royal decrees, will be constantly consulted too. The real relevant Middle Mongol corpus is much smaller, about a dozen, but these were issued on the highest levels of the same administrative system as the Old Uyghur documents, making them invaluable as comparative material. More precisely, if we compare the formal aspects and contents of the Old Uyghur and Mongolian documents, we see that by the second decade of the 14th century, there were at the latest 3 levels of imperial administrative activity in the Turfan region. Local administrative activities, that is the operation of a single postal station operations of single postal stations, constituted 1 stratum. Above that was a regional level from which the majority of the Uyghur administrative orders come. And about these, a highest level, that of the Mongolian decrees. It is worth mentioning that the formation of this triple level administration similarly overlapped with the Chagatai takeover in Central Asia in the early 14th century. As dates are often missing from the Old Uyghur documents, the periodization of these texts had been very problematic. Moreover, when a date is presented, in most cases, it is expressed according to the 12-year animal cycle calendar, and thus an absolute dating of the documents is impossible on this basis. A more or less accurate dating is usually possible where a personal name, known otherwise, like the name of a ruler or the like, is attested in the text. Consequently, relative dating, that is a rough determination of age according to the text's formal and content-related peculiarities, is crucial for the study of this material. Based on a relative chronology, the material can be divided into 2 parts: an earlier layer dating to the so-called West Uyghur period between the 10th and 12th century, 9th and 12th centuries, and a later layer dating to the Mongol period, that is the 13th, 14th centuries. Takao Moriyasu has distinguished 3 kinds of criteria, namely script, terminology, and personal names, and pointed out that all documents from the Mongol period are written in semi-cursive or cursive script. Here you can see the various terminological groups serving as markers for the dating. So, through analysis of various stamping methods applied to the official documents, further accuracy in dating could be established for a subgroup of documents, the so-called administrative documents, in several cases even achieving an absolute dating. As you can see on this slide, this methodology permits 7 different chronological groups of the administrative documents to be distinguished that we will use now. So, but what is the relation of the documents concerning the postal system and that of the administrative documents? Since the postal system was a subsystem of the overall administration, a significant overlap can be detected between administrative and official postal documents. So far, 99 Old Uyghur administrative documents have been dated with some accuracy, and these form our broader pool. The narrower group of our sources will be those official documents which are connected to the postal system. I will call this group postal documents. Overlap between the 2 groups is significant. Of the 45 Old Uyghur postal documents, only 5 are not included to the administrative documents category. This means that 40 of 99 more or less datable administrative documents are somehow connected to the postal system, a fact which shows the importance of the YAM system, of the postal system in the region. As a consequence, thanks to accurate dating of the administrative documents and their overlap with the postal documents, 3 interrelated questions can be analyzed. First, the general operation of administration in the region under Mongol rule. Second, specific changes in the operation of the postal system in this period. And third, the importance of the postal system within the whole administrative framework. If we turn our attention to temporal distribution, we see that 97% of the old Uyghur administrative documents stem from the Mongol period. Only this small slice of cake shows the documents which are stemming from the West Uyghur period. This difference in numbers is too big to be explained by temporal difference alone. It might refer to the destruction of the archives of official documents from the earlier period, but also to the fact that the administrative apparatus became significantly enlarged and more sophisticated under Mongol rule. If we take the material from the Mongol period into account, we see that the majority of the datable old Uyghur official documents were issued after the dissolution of the United Empire period, that is after the mid-13th century. Again, this may be explained by the destruction of earlier materials during intra-Mongol clashes, but later development of the local administration and archives is also conceivable. More than 1/3 of the administrative documents are dated between the late 3020s and 3060s, showing a continuous function of administration in Uyghur language at the local and regional bureaucratic levels, even in the time of the mid-14th century crisis that affected the most of Eurasia and especially the Mongol realms. As I mentioned, approximately 40% of the administrative documents are connected to the YAM system. On the one hand, this shows the importance of the relay system within the administration. On the other, it makes clear just how enormous a burden the establishment and maintenance of this system was. In the earlier phase of the Mongol rule, the proportion of the postal documents, the reds are the postal documents. So in the earlier phase of the Mongol rule, the proportion of the postal documents within the administrative texts are very high, which confirms that the establishment of the postal network was of preeminent importance in the initial phase of the imperial organization. Later, as the total number of administrative documents increases, the ratio of postal documents drops. Still, about 40% of the documents stemming from the mid-14th century are postal documents. If we take the whole Mongol period, this is the sixth group between B and G. If we take all of them into account, this share is almost about 46%. And if we add the 13 documents of group H that stem from the Mongol period, but for which more accurate dating was impossible, then we have almost the same ratio, with slightly under 46% being postal documents. Summing up the above, the overwhelming majority of old Uyghur documents stem from the Mongol period. The operation of the administration was continuous in the 13th, 14th centuries, and that of the postal system within it too. In the early Mongol period, a majority of administrative documents are connected to the postal system, but it deserves mention that the total number of documents is lower here. Later, the proportion of the postal documents decreased, but remained above 40%. Now we shall turn our attention to the spatial aspects of our documents. The provenance of around half of the administrative and postal documents is known. All of these were found within a 13-kilometer circle around Turfan, marked with the yellow circle on this map. Only 2 of the documents were found circa 110 kilometers to the east at modern Chikhtin. The distribution of place names attested in the old Uyghur documents is not even. In the 39 documents from the 13th century, 9 toponyms are attested, and all of these places are connected to the postal system. In the 44 documents from the 14th century, only 5 toponyms are mentioned, and only 2 can be connected to the relay system. In short, if we look at the old Uyghur administrative documents, we see that the state apparatus was functional throughout the Mongol period, and the numbers of official documents do not drop even during the mid-14th century crisis of the Mongol Empire. Meanwhile, the proportion of those documents that belong to the postal system is clearly lower in this period, and parallel to this, the network of postal stations decreased also. Also, it seems that the administration was less able or willing to support physical mobility on a local and regional level in the later Mongol period. If we compare the postal network depicted according to the place names in the old Uyghur documents with that of the external narrative sources, we find crucial differences. Most of the place names attested concerning the postal system are located in the immediate vicinity of Kocho. They show a clear east-west route with a turnoff to the northern slopes of the Tian Shan. If we compare this network drawn by the Uyghur toponyms with that of the narrative sources analyzed by Hosung Shim lastly, the former shows a more sophisticated network, but over a significantly smaller territory. To adapt Lane J. Harris's analogy from 2017 concerning the relay and post station systems in Ming China, where the postal and relay stations were the arteries and veins of the imperial body, then the old Uyghur documents even show us the capillary vessels, while the narrative sources let us see only the main vascular structure of the imperial body. Turning our attention to the Mongolian documents, we see that all of them were issued in the 14th century, the earliest in 3026, and the latest accurately dated in 3069. Most of them were found in Kocho, except two that were unearthed in Dunhuang and Karahoto. But even these two are tightly connected to the Turfan region by their contents. Comparison of their provenance with their places of issue show that they were created hundreds of kilometers to the west and northwest of Uyghur lands in the vicinity of the Chagatai capital Almalik. Here, the green is Almalik, the reds are the places of issue. This peculiarity seems to prove my earlier theory based on the comparative formal and content analysis of the Uyghur and Mongolian documents. That is, the Mongolian documents were issued at the highest interregional level of the administration, and the former, that is the Uyghur documents, at the local and regional levels. One of the Mongolian decrees is especially interesting since it connects the Turfan and Eastern Tian Shan region with the Gansu corridor, and probably Tibet and perhaps with China proper also. At the same time, also connecting pilgrim activities to the postal system. Chinese scholars discovered this decree in the northern section of the Mogao caves, and the manuscripts is preserved today at the Dunhuang Academy. The decree is a so-called travel permit, and it was issued by Kedmen Bagatur, the governor of the Turfan region under the Chagatai Khanate in the latter half of the 14th century, but before 1374. The decree was issued for a high-ranking Tibetan Buddhist priest serving the Yuan court. According to the document, the priest made a pilgrimage in the Barskal, Beshbalik, and Kocho region. If we project the map of the main postal route between China proper and the Turfan region on the toponyms attested in this document, the two routes are identical. Moreover, this decree shows that the connection between the Turfan region and Dunhuang was still active in the second half of the 14th century. However, this period was quite troubled in these regions. After the temporal and spatial aspects of the documents, we now turn our attention to the operation of the YAM system and first to the animals provided for it. The YAM system covered enormous territories across Eurasia, and due to the differing geographical regions and aims of the travelers using it, demanded different means of travel. For example, the Chinese sources report the various animals and vehicles that belong to the postal system in various regions of China under the rule of Kublai Khan. Such territorial differences are mirrored in the Uyghur and Middle Mongolian documents also. In the Uyghur documents from the Turfan region, only donkeys and different kinds of horses are attested as mounts, with an ox mentioned in one case. In contrast to this, a few hundred kilometers to the east, in the Gansu corridor, we see that of the 3 Mongolian documents concerning the post unearthed in the vicinity of Dunhuang, 2 mentions camels as part of the relay supply system. As you can see here, provisions in the documents can be divided into several categories. The basic provisions consisted of meat, liquor, and grain, and in the Chinese sources, rice appears as well. Comparative analysis of the Mongolian, Uyghur, and Chinese sources has permitted the reconstruction of defined amounts of daily provisions. Uyghur provision orders, in the Uyghur provision orders, flour and meat are attested mostly as food for provision. But if we take into account the other documents concerning the postal system, several other kind of rations can be found also. In most cases, wine appears as a beverage, but in one case, sorma, that is kind of wheat beer, perhaps, is attested too. Nevertheless, the animals had provisions, that is fodder too. Hay and straw were provided as fodder, usually. The fourth group of goods supplied was clothing. In the documents, various kinds of clothes can be attested, like boots, jackets, or short fur garments, raincoats, and so on. The last group of supplies, what I would like to mention here, I could describe it as other necessities, such as dry firewood, lamp, an oil folder lamp, and so on. However, many of these supplies are attested only in the private documents concerning the postal station and not in the official documents, but due to the fact that these private documents are concerned with the deliveries to the postal system, it is highly likely that these goods were provided for the travelers also, or at least used within the postal system. After this overview of the latest results concerning the Mongol administration in Turfan region in general and that of the postal system in particular, based on the old Uyghur and Middle Mongolian documents, I would now like to show an example of how such a result are reached through the philological analysis of the documents. This last section will focus on the philological analysis of a single register and its historical interpretation. The transcription and translation of the text you have already received in advance as part of the handout. So the manuscript in question forms part of the Turfan collection in Berlin. The text is written in a cursive form of the Uyghur script, and it is preserved on 2 separately glazed fragments. The first 36 lines on one fragment and the last 16 lines on the other. The quality of the paper is semi-coarse and its color is middle brown. The first fragment is 30.7 centimeter long and 22.5 centimeter wide, while the second is 13.5 centimeter long and 11.8 centimeter wide. The recto side of the manuscript contains a Chinese Buddhist text and a list of different quantities of buzz, that is pieces of cotton cloth, also used as currency, written between the lines of the Chinese text here. The register under discussion has been preserved on the verso side of the manuscript. Based on the features and circumstances described above, we can draw 2 conclusions. One, that the paper of for the manuscript was reused, suggests that the paper was precious material that was scarce in the region. This claim is substantiated by the fact that numerous other manuscripts currently in the Turfan collection had been similarly reused They have a Chinese, usually Buddhist text on one side, and an Uyghur text on the other, or in between the lines of the Chinese text. Two, it can be assumed that our register of short distance horses on the verso side was written later than the Chinese Buddhist text on the recto side, but earlier than the Uyghur list of birds, which is preserved between the lines of the Chinese text. The text lists horses provided for different people, also enumerating the names of those who supplied them. The beginning of the document is unfortunately missing, but the dating, which is provided in day and month format, is continuous throughout the text. Based on the dates and writing styles used, the manuscript can be divided into two parts. Part one was written between the 21st day of the 6th month and day 4 of the 7th month, while part 2 was added in smaller letters on or around the first 2 days of the 8th month. Here you can see the two parts marked with red and blue respectively on the facsimile. Judging by the difference in writing styles, the two parts were either written by different hands or by the same hand with different writing implements. It must also be noted a slight difference in writing style can be detected in the last section of the manuscript as well. While the handwriting remains the same, the script style changes as of line 34. Ultimately, this survey of the dates and writing styles may thus provide an explanation for the unchronological order of the lines. So here, column 1, that was the first, then the second, then the third, and then the 4th and 5th columns were written in between with smaller letters later. And thus we can reconstruct the text as it was written in the original time sequence, that is, as you can read it in the translation on the handouts. This is, there is a circa 0.4–0.5 centimeter wide margin at the upper margin of each fragment. There is only one exception of this in line 31, where the title of the Uyghur ruler Idok Kut begins immediately at the top of the paper. Here you can see that it starts immediately at the top of the page without a margin, while the following two lines, 32 and 33, were indented below the margin by the scribe. This feature is called an honorific lift and was intended to express respect for members of the Uyghur ruling family or the Chinggisid lineage. A special feature of the script is that the strokes of the last words, you can see here, each line are usually quite long, possibly to fill the line and thus prevent later additions to the text. Similar fillings are observable in other Old Uyghur documents also, like here in the 11th line of this so-called Kezig order. Line 19 of the register provides the clue for the interpretation of the document. It says, Altinch Aybir Otuska Kizga at Otigi. It is the register of the short distance horses up to the 21st day of the 6th month. In the Uyghur documents, both uzun, long, and kizga, short horses are mentioned. These adjectives refer to the distances the horses could reach. Thus, an uzunat was horse for longer distance, long distance travel, while a kizgat could be used for shorter distance journeys. One more expression falls within this group of phrases, namely tuliat, middle distance horse. Based on this three-tier classification of the horses within the postal system can be reconstructed. On the basis of the distance they were able to travel. Relying on the available data and toponyms found in the documents, I attempted to calculate the approximate distance of the range of the Kizgaat horses in my PhD dissertation, and my result there corresponds to the information found in most of the narrative sources, as they usually state the average distance between two postal stations around 30 kilometers. The next problem associated with the text concerns the practice of dating. Some phrases in the text are helpful in determining the date of the manuscript. The cursive style of the script and the term daruga in line 21 allow us to place the text in the Mongol period. Furthermore, the appearance of the title Idakut may help us to determine a more precise time frame. In the second half of the 1270s, the Uyghur ruler Kochkar Idakut moved his court from Beshbalik to Kocho and then to Kamil, that is Hami. Soon afterward, his successor Neuril was moved by Kubilai to Yongchang in Gansu. From then on, the ruling family of the Uyghurs was in exile and thus practically unable to affect the fate of their homeland. There was only one interlude, as shortly before his death in 1318, around, Neuril recaptured Kocho for a short period. A Mongol document in the St. Petersburg collection from 1339, issued in the name of Yisim Temur, also mentions the Idakut of Kocho, but this time he seems to have been appointed by the Chagatai ruler. This data and the mention of the title Idakut suggest three possible dates for the manuscript, the 1270s or earlier, around 1318 or around 1339. The next question is the place where the manuscript was prepared. Only three toponyms occur in the document as possible destinations for people who used the postal relay service. These localities are Kocho, mentioned 4 times, Yemshi twice, and Yar, that is Yarkoto once. All three localities were situated in the vicinity of Turpan. Yar was situated about 10 kilometers to the west of Turfan. Kocho and Yemshi lay to the southeast and southwest of Turfan respectively, along the main east-west road. The distance between the two latter towns was around 60 kilometers by road. Based on the average distance between the postal stations in the Yam system, this is about 30 kilometers, the estimated range of the Kisgaats and the short distance horses, and the locations of Kocho and Yemshi, I would assume that the postal station where this register was written was situated somewhere midway between these two localities, probably in the immediate vicinity of Turfan. A brief survey of the beneficiaries, that is the people who received the horses, and the number of horses provided yields some further information that is of interest. In general, when the beneficiaries are identifiable, they are either officials, such as elchis, or certain document creator, or a certain document creator, or dignitaries, for example, daruga, or commanders of thousands, members of the nobility, and even the Uyghur ruler, the Idakut, mentioned above. He was reported to have 6 horses at the station, which was the highest number of horses any one person received according to the document. Only one other person was granted so many horses, a certain Kidatai Achi, who traveled to Kocho. The 1,000 chiefs and the bags only received 5 horses altogether. These numbers suggest that Kidatai Achi must have been a high-ranking officer or on a highly important mission, probably together with a small retinue. Another interesting group of travelers is the guests who returned to the postal station. The traveler who appears most frequently is a person by the name of Togugan, who came to the station 6 consecutive days. During each of the last 4 days of these, another traveler named Songdai also figured in the record, but he was supplied 1 horse each day, while Togugan usually received 2. These people might have been officials or officers serving in the region, or people in other privileged positions who were thus entitled to make regular use of the relay system's services. Other beneficiaries seems to have appeared no more than twice on the list. typically on consecutive days, which may indicate that they traveled back and forth from one of the adjacent towns. The people on the other side of the relay connection, namely those who provided the horses, are equally interesting. Most notably, even if one traveler went away with several horses, he was always supplied only one horse from each person. For example, when the Idakut received 6 horses, here, these came from 6 different people. Meanwhile, some of these providers are mentioned several times, as you can see on this color-coded list. A person by the name of Sevik appears 6 times in total. There are 15 people whose names figure at least twice in the list, and only 7 who only supplied horses once according to our document. In 5 cases, the providers of the horses cannot be identified due to damage to the manuscript. These people were likely to have been either heads of or representatives of local postal households. Chinese sources concerning the Mongol postal system in Yuan China were analyzed in a monograph by Peter Olbricht in 1954. Unfortunately, even today, this is the sole in-depth analysis of this material in any Western language. Nevertheless, it can still help us to contextualize this register. The Chinese sources clarify that postal station masters were responsible for the assets and animals belonging to the station under their jurisdiction. Postal households had to provide the horses, and the postmasters were required to keep a record in a register that was to be checked each month by their superiors. The horses were expected to be healthy and well-fed, and they had to be used evenly to avoid exhaustion. This may explain why only one horse was supplied at a time. However, if we also take into account the value of a horse, it seems conceivable that this practice was also meant to prevent individual postal households from being overburdened. Another interesting addendum to the practice of taxation is that if the text is read in the original chronological orders as presented in this table, one observes that the names of the taxpayers appeared with some regularity, implying that they paid their duties at regular intervals. Based on the finding presented in this case study, it seems highly probable that the register under investigation was written as a rough draft for a report on the volume of traffic at a postal station, with a focus on the obligations placed on the postal households assigned to that station in the form of horses to be provided for the travelers. The place of issue could be somewhere around Turfan. The exact date of production cannot be determined, but 3 possible dates could be offered. Based on the circumstances under which the document was prepared and its purpose, I suggest that it is a type of official register made for internal administrative use. This register was prepared at the lowest administrative level of the postal system. It is not easy to draw a conclusion after such a long talk, but if we want to grab the essence of the last 1 hour, probably it is to concentrate on 2 things: the bottom-up perspective offered by the documents and the centrality of the postal system within the society and the imperial landscape. The Old Uyghur and Middle Mongolian documents form the largest group of unique primary sources issued within or in connection to the postal system of the Mongol Empire. Due to this fact, not only their content, but also their formal attributes can contribute to our understanding of the Mongol administration. They give us insights about daily operation of the Yam system, of the postal system, in the Turfan region and the Gansu corridor. The bottom-up picture they show is unique and reflects aspects of this enormous imperial daily aspects of this enormous imperial institution. If we compare the network drawn by the Uyghur toponyms with that of the narrative sources. The former shows a more sophisticated network, but on a significantly smaller territory. The source material discussed today confirms that the postal system was one of the most important Imperial Mongol institutions, at least in the Tufan region. Almost half of the, about 40%, but sometimes almost the half of the administrative documents are connected to the YAM system. On the one hand, this shows the importance of the relay system within the administration. On the other, it makes clear just how enormous a burden the establishment and maintenance of this system was. It is also important to note that almost every group in a society and every imperial institution had some kind of relationship with it, with the postal system. In this respect, we can argue that the postal system had a central role, not only in the inter-imperial landscape of the Mongol Empire, but also within the society and in the everyday life of most people. Thus, if we want to write a comprehensive history of the Mongol postal system, it must be a mixture, a hybrid of an administrative and a social history. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Márton, for this wonderful talk. Very rich in images and data, of course. So we open the floor for discussion. If you have a question, then you could raise your hand maybe. And if I don't see you, then just maybe speak up.
I have an addition.
Yes.
Márton, I don't know if you have following book.
I don't see.
Do you know it?
I have to change the.
Did you see it?
I don't have it at home, but I know the book.
Because it is also lexicology on Old Uyghur documents, including Old Uyghur documents too. Not only documents, texts with non-religion texts, shortly to summarize. Yeah, this is also a study on Old Uyghur documents. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And I see Christopher, you have a question. We cannot hear you for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Really a great presentation. I really appreciated the discussion. I'm wondering about these amounts of horses for the Idokut and so on. 6 horses and 5 for a beck. Compared to the literary sources, these look really small. For example, I always like to say in my class when I teach about the Mongol Empire, Marco Polo says to talk about how wonderfully he was honored that at one point he had 200 riders riding in his party as he was accompanying the princess. And then there's a really funny comment in Rashid ad-Din who says the post road system was so exaggerated that every nobody had 200 riders. It's the exact same number. So therefore, Marco Polo was just another nobody. But those numbers are so vastly smaller than your numbers. I was wondering if you, hey, do you have an explanation for that?
Yes and no. I was thinking about it as well, because the difference is really huge between the narrative sources and these documentary sources. I surmise that, of course, not every document came down to us. So just some parts, some archives that we have. It could be one reason for the loss. The loss of some parts of the archives. And other, what I think is conceivable is that perhaps not every kind of mission, diplomatic mission, was conducted written in writing. So as it's the same like we have the Paidzit or Geraget in Mongolian, these tablets of authority. And for a while, I couldn't understand. On the one hand, we have this, what we call the passport of the Mongols, and you can use the postal system with it. On the other hand, I have these documents that are describing how many wine should be given or meat should be given, and so on. So how these two works together. On the one hand, the Chinese sources described it, in some cases they used both. So one needed both of them, a written order and permission, and the Baide as well. And on the other hand, some really high-ranking officials, I can imagine that they didn't need it, or really important embassies. So when, for example, a Georg-August prince was in the embassy with 200 people, they didn't write down everything, or they organized it in another way, not the ordinary postal systems, which had a limited number of horses and provisions. So this way could I explain the differences. And we have to keep in mind that, however, this part of the empire was a very important mediator between China proper and Central Asia. It is not the central part of any of the Mongol realms. I hope I could give some kind of answer.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big mystery. Thank you. Appreciate those comments.
Okay, other questions or comments?
Just have a very
Yes.
naive question. Márton, thank you very much for your insightful talk. I was wondering about the origin of this postal system itself. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I have some. In the IMA, Archivum Mediae, that was my first English article, I guess, where I started to figure out what could be the origin of this postal system. Usually there was two approaches, two kind of approaches to this question. One was a more a linguistic approach, which try to etymologize the different names for the postal system, like the jam, yam, and especially and also the name for the postal horses, that is the ulag in Old Uyghur, or the ulaga in Mongolian, and the other were historical approaches. If we want to summarize them, I would say that the etymologies can lead away. I would say so. It's better to try to reconstruct the historical process. And as I see, I agree with Olsen in this. He wrote a brilliant review on Silverstein's book in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, a 30 pages review with a lot of material. And in its conclusion, he writes that it's not sure that we can follow it back to one origin, this whole system. This institution, as many of the imperial institutions of the Mongol Empire we see, is a result of centuries of cooperation and enmity between sedentary civilizations and nomadic peoples. And in the case of the Mongol postal system, we see at least three different traditions we can see. The Chinese tradition is surely there. There was an Islamicate or Muslim tradition. And I would say that there is some kind of Central Asian tradition to maintain this kind of relay system, latest since the Göktürk Empire in the 6th century. I mean, that this, as Silverstein writes on one point, putting someone on a horse and sending him to somewhere, that's quite easy to do, and most of the societies reach this level. But to provide regular provisions, change of horses, and so on, that's another fact. But later, since the Turks, we can say that it existed in Central Asia. It went back in to Chinese traditions, at least partly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alisher. Other comments or questions?
I would just want to note just
Yes.
about that last point. I know George Kara has always suggested, he's very, of course, it's just a hypothesis, but the actual origin of the word jam, the Mongolian yam, his argument is that it may actually be originally of Chinese origin. It may be simply the John, which actually in medieval Chinese had an M. This has sometimes been taken to be the Chinese characters sort of taking this version of the Mongolian, but his argument is that it may well actually be the other way around, which would be an interesting, a very interesting early borrowing into Mongolian and into Uyghur from their languages.
Indeed, it's one of the etymologies, and I guess the latest most recently also deals with this question in this review that I mentioned.
Okay. This is, of course, the idea that Paleo already.
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, it's his. Yes, Susan.
Oh, yeah. Professor Zim want to say something, so
Okay.
please go ahead.
First, you.
No, I don't have any opinion. I just want to have some footnotes. So go ahead.
I have only one short imagination or something like that. If you are in, for example, in Yar Khoto, it's a very small place. I cannot imagine how 200 horses could be there. It's impossible. It's a very small place, the city, and it's a whole city, the Yar Khoto. So this may be also one reason for the number of horses. I don't know whether it is important or not, but in Turfan city it might be, but we have no documents from Turfan city itself. We have only from Kocho or from Sengim or Toyok and so on. So I don't know. It's only one argument for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what I tried to express with this, that these Uyghur, in these Uyghur documents, what we see are really these small sideways in some cases, not the main highways, not the vascular system of the imperial body, is that. So, and I think this is how it's complement our picture from the narrative sources, where we see really the imperial highways, which are basically the same between China proper and Central Asia since the Han Dynasty, through the Hexi corridor, the Gansu corridor. But these small sideways we do not have in other descriptions, as far as I'm concerned. But for the small numbers, it's also a conceivable explanation, I would say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Susan.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, starting with Chris' question about, 6 horses versus 200. I quickly check Dang Baohai's study, and, to me, his study of the Yuan postal system represent the Chinese language publications, the most updated scholarship. And so in this book, 蒙元驿站交通研究, on page 237, he talked about the numbers of horses used for different official categories. So the numbers, and that's a good news, because I think that his data kind of match Márton's data, because you say that Itagut have 6 horses, right? So the number here, he said that depending on the level of official rank, the highest official rank has horses like 8 horses, and then then there are 5 horses, 3 horses, and 2 horses. So the number is not that dramatic as 200. So, so that's something to think about. And the date that he cited is around 1271. And these are, of course, from the Chinese official sources, 永乐大典的战事 and also 元典章 official documents.
Indeed, and thank you very much, Susan. And I think the similarity between the Uyghur and Chinese sources in this respect could be explained that besides the Uyghur and Mongolian sources, the Chinese sources are that preserved in a way these documents that were issued during the daily processes of the postal system, the daily operation of the postal system, just not in original, but in copies or in descriptions of these documents or examples of these documents copied. That's this difference what makes in a way very precious the Uyghur and Mongolian material, that here we have the actual paper. It was written on.
Right.
But
and I want to say something more. The maximum of 8 horses he cited here is actually about the Sichuan administrator. So it's not really like in Dadu or something. It's it's in a southwestern region,
yes,
of the Yuan.
Indeed.
So that's good news to match with your
yes, indeed.
data.
And I think what we have to keep in mind as well, if we talk about distances between postal stations, about the number of forces and so on, that it was not unified within the whole empire. So there were more central territories and more peripheral territories. For example, when Rubruk and the Plano Carpini described their way through the steppe region, that was not really populated, and I think Rubruk writes that they could stop only once a day because the stations were so rare. So there we have to think about this, that there were different local differences, not that about animals, but also about the other aspects of the postal relay.
If I may, can I ask a different question? Right. So, I'm very intrigued about how you date the handwriting. And, I remember you cite previous scholarship and say that 9th to 12th century, the Uyghur writing is one type, which you say is more square or semi-square, whereas the 13th to 14th century script tend to be cursive or semi-cursive. And, so I recently discussed with Kizudo-san, Koichi Kizudo, and I realized that even for the expert such as him, this kind of dating could be a little bit tricky. So I wonder if you can say more about this.
This kind of relative dating based on the different style of scripts was established by Moriyasu Takao. And in his, he published it in English in his 2004 article, and he compared lots of documents, and based on this, he said, I showed us that slide again. One moment. In fact, this picture is from this article. And he doesn't say that always, but in most of the cases, and it goes so semi-cursive can sometimes be earlier, but very cursive writings are almost always from the Mongol period, and then the other way, very square script, what we can hear with considerably high certainty can be dated to the West Uyghur period. But what is important, if we have other markers, then the dating is much more sure. So, and for example, in this case, in the case of the this register, what I showed at the end of the presentation, we have both. We have the daruga as a marker, and we have the style of the script. And
So in terms of writing tool, does it change? Didn't change?
No. I would say that I work almost exclusively due to the material with text from the Mongol period, and in practice it means I really need sometimes if I read earlier texts because for most of the people that's the easier. But I'm used to the methodology and the way of reading these cursive text, and the difference is quite.
I see. It's obvious.
Obvious. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments? Okay, we have a comment from Mehmet Olmez in the chat window.
Yes, because it was about Yam. Dörfer, he mentioned Yam in fourth volume of Türkische und Mongolische Elemente in Neupersischen, but just very short, in a few lines. It cannot be Turkish. It should be in first volume, in Mongolian volume, because Turkish language, Turkic languages, which Dörfer mentioned, they have borrowed it from Mongolian. All are late borrowings from Mongolian. Thanks.
Right, thank you. So other questions, comments, criticism?
If I can add something to the Yam and the predecessor of this Mongol system, I remember that the Khitan people studying the Khitan Liao, they have long proposed that this system are kind of shared, and you can see it from the material remains as well, because recently there have been not only the illustrations recorded in the official books, but the actual material you find, the Liao Dynasty Paizi, is the kind of travel passport in North China, and it's elongated. And some of the like phrases, could be compared to the Chinese, the Yuan Dynasty samples as well. So there is definitely this sharing.
Yes, and the earliest Paizis from the Mongol period, if I'm not mistaken, they are written with Khitan script.
Yeah.
For exactly the same Paizis as well. Yeah. And Morgan, in his famous The Mongols, argues or writes that it's almost certain that the postal system goes back to Khitan origins, but there he did not cite the sources for that, but he was very sure, as I remember that part.
Right.
All right, Leela.
Hi, thank you for the great talk. A very small question. I noticed that the route from Kocho to Bashbali goes all around the mountains. How about just across? So, because I talked to people in China and they said they actually tried it out, and I went to Bashbali, and of course today too you travel by car all around, but it's much shorter to go across the mountains. So any considerations that might have been the case, or is it impossible to tell, or what's your approach?
Thank you very much. It's a brilliant question because it touches upon many important aspects of the postal system. I would say the first what I find important to mention is that it's always hard to avoid cheating when you reconstruct a communication network, because we have points and we don't have lines, we don't have routes. So we have, or sometimes we have lines because when they say that to go to somewhere. In some cases, what I wrote on the map, they were cases when they wrote that we go from here to there. These are the best, but in many cases we have only points, dots in a network. The other one is that there was not only one kind of post. As I said at the end, the postal system was connected with almost every layers of the society and every imperial institutions. The three main type of postal services are described in the Chinese sources. It was these are transcriptions from Mongolian. There was the Morin jam, the horse post. That was the kind of the average post, the normal post, what we read here, as they get horses and they travel. There was the chariot post or wagon post, Tergen jam, that was meant to transport goods. For example, to Karakorum, to provision the city. It was so big that it couldn't produce enough food. On a daily basis, 800 chariots from China proper went to Karakorum, that is the Tergen jam. And the third one is the so-called Narin jam. That is a narrow post, and usually it is considered as the secret post or the express post for very important issues between the armies and the center and so on. That was the second. The third thing to consider is that we have this Merkin or Berkin tribe that is moved by the Mongols from the Tian Shan Mountains, if I'm not mistaken, to the South Caucasus, as they established their imperial rule in this region, and it's explicitly written by Giovanni, if I'm correct, that they were moved there in order to establish the postal system, because they were very good mountaineers, and in this mountain area to give the postal service. And then we can think about the Kitipu in China, the running post, that when the messages were transported by runners, and then we can imagine how it could work in the Hein Mountains, such a postal system. But we have no direct description that somebody goes straight through from Kocho or Turfan to Beshbalik through the mountains, at least in the postal documents. I have no such document.
I'm asking because at one point it was supposed to be the summer capital and the winter capital. And this particular person who used to work at that point at the Turfan Research Academy said that he actually tried it out, and he camped in the forest, and he thought it was really possible with horses and large number, it would be the whole court, all the people. So I just thought it was a fun idea, because it seems, of course, a very logical way to go there, but I have no idea. That's interesting that you say that there's no proof at all that that happened. So just, just bearing in mind for
at least in my.
Peter.
But
Peter,
what I found already also interesting. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Hello?
Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I only wanted to mention that what Lisa said, we have not related to the postal system, but we have, of course, the travel account of Wang Yande in the 980.
Yes.
And he went from through the mountains, and he gave a detailed report. Umimura-san has written about it too.
Yes, on the burning
if you
mountains
remember.
and so on. Yes. Yes, I meant there is no postal document, so I cannot
it is
say
not
that the
in the. Of course, it is not related to the postal, but he also used horses, I guess.
Yes,
Young ambassador.
Peter, didn't you and I saw that wonderful mural, which is now now been restored by the Chinese, of the Uyghur king's procession up through the mountains from Turfan to the summer capital, and they had the elephants depicted, etc. Remember, you and I saw that, and surely if that's used for an imperial route, and there were all these wonderful depictions of mounted cavalry, etc. from the Mongol period, it would seem, I mean, I'm only surmising and I know nothing about the topic, that if it is used for an imperial route, and it must have had some, some way established that it might well be used also for a postal route. You wouldn't use it just necessarily for one purpose. And that was through the mountains.
No, of course you are right, but what we really need are the documents
Oh, of course,
of the Mongol period.
Yes.
So I fully agree with Márton that if we don't have the documents to prove it, it is difficult to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that just leads me to a very general question, again, showing that I'm not acquainted with the area. I was very interested. I was a very keen equestrian in my youth, that you had the 3 categories of horses, depending on the distances that they would travel. Do we have any further insight, and that might be divorced from the postal documents, of what types? I mean, they must have been different breeds to have the different names. Do we have any further insight?
I'm trying to find that part. It's also a very good question. No, wrong order. I have to share the screen. So
because you would not use a horse for, say, 50 kilometers that you would use necessarily, or 10 kilometers that you'd use for, say, 50 or 100. I mean, it may be a completely false, but I just thought, given the fact that they had different terminology, it might relate to different breeds that were used for different purposes. But that
it could be. We don't have any evidence for that to tell if it's different breeds or something. What we see that, as you may know, that in Mongolian and in Mongolic and Turkic languages, the terminology for different kind of horses is extremely rich. Usually, it's based on the age and the color of the animals. But what we see here is that we have here also a kind of complicated or a complex system of denominations for the different kind of horses, but it's a very practical way. So they said it's a mungu at. Mun is to ride. Mungu at is for a riding horse, or yam at. There's a postal horse. We have one attestation of that. What is also an interesting thing is this bogus at, because bogus, the first meaning of this word in Turkic is throat. Usually it's considered. And they taught on the basis of Wang Yanda, the mentioned Wang Yanda, the song envoy, because he says, he writes in his account that the Uyghurs ate horses as well. And based on this, they taught for, it was surmised that these boguzat are horses to be eaten. But bogus, in fact, has another meaning, a kind of fodder or provision in later sources. And I would say this boguzat, where its force comes, it rather refers to a led horse that was carrying the provision. So that, for example, when one got provision for 5 people, they couldn't necessarily take it on their own horses, so they needed another horse.
A pack horse.
Pet horse, yes.
And that would be a different constitution, generally speaking, to a riding horse. Be a much sturdier beast.
Sorry?
It would be a much sturdier beast.
Yes, I would say yes. And we have depiction of these kind of horses in the Dietz album, in the miniatures. We have that one has the paidze on the miniature, and the other leads these horses with the provisions on the horses. So if we put these together, then we have a small, beautiful picture. And yes, to what I can say is that we have a complex terminology for the animals and for the horses, but it's completely different from the normal or average terminology in Turkic and Mongolian languages. However, that is also rich, but here they use these practical considerations.
All right, I'm afraid we completely ran out of time. So we have to, for now, we have to thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
So